My boyfriend faked a proposal as a joke, so I ended the relationship immediately. I remember waking up to the soft but insistent sound of my alarm. It was 7 a.m., an unusually early hour for me on a day off. Still groggy and not entirely sure if I was still dreaming, I felt Andrew's hand gently shaking my shoulder. His voice was warm, teasing, and a little playful as he urged me to get up, mentioning something about going to the spa. I blinked my eyes open, surprised, and turned to look at him. This wasn't a special day. No birthdays, no anniversaries, nothing that would warrant a spa trip. But seeing his enthusiastic grin, I couldn't help but smile. The idea of a relaxing spa day was appealing, so I quickly agreed. The spa was just as luxurious as I had imagined. The scent of lavender hung in the air, soothing and calming, and the soft ambient music only added to the serene atmosphere. As I lay on the massage table, feeling the tension melt away, I found myself marveling at how thoughtful Andrew could be. This was exactly what I needed, a day of pampering with the person I loved. After we finished our treatments, Andrew casually mentioned that he wanted to take me to a fancy restaurant later. He even insisted that he would pay. It had been a while since we had gone out together like this, and the idea of a romantic dinner made me feel warm inside. I agreed, excited to continue the day's unexpected surprises. We arrived at the restaurant just as the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden hue over everything. The place was perfect, intimate lighting, elegant decor, and a quiet corner table that seemed to be waiting just for us. As we sat down, I couldn't help but feel like everything was falling into place. We talked about the future, about the house we were planning to move into, and laughed over silly little things. It felt like a scene from a movie, almost too perfect to be real. Then, after about 40 minutes, Andrew did something that completely took my breath away. He stood up, smoothing out his jacket, and then, to my utter shock, he got down on one knee. My heart nearly stopped. I stared at him, wide-eyed, as he pulled out a small box from his pocket. My mind was racing. We hadn't talked about marriage before, but in that moment, it felt like the right time. It was as if everything in our 5-year relationship had been leading up to this. He began speaking, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. He told me how I was the most beautiful girl in the world, how much he loved me, and how he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. His words were perfect, and when he ended with, "Will you marry me, my princess?" my heart swelled with joy. Without hesitation, I said yes, my voice barely above a whisper, full of tears and happiness. But then, everything shattered. Andrew opened the small box, and instead of the ring I was expecting, there was a note inside. Confusion washed over me as I picked up the note, and my stomach dropped when I read it. "You've been pranked." I looked up at Andrew, who was now laughing hysterically, tears of mirth in his eyes. He leaned in, still chuckling, and said, "Baby, this was just a prank. I'm not ready at all to marry you yet." Time seemed to freeze. The joy, the excitement, all of it drained away, replaced by a cold, hollow feeling. I could feel my heart breaking as I realized what had just happened. He was still laughing, as if it was all some big joke. But to me, it wasn't. It was a cruel, heartless betrayal. Without thinking, I slapped him hard across the face. Tears were streaming down my cheeks as I stood up and told him, "We're over, you scumbag." My voice was shaking with a mix of anger and devastation. Now, I'm sitting alone in my bed, my face buried in my hands, tears soaking the pillow. My phone keeps buzzing, text after text, call after call, all from Andrew. But I can't bring myself to respond. I feel shattered, betrayed, and utterly lost. What was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of my life turned into a nightmare. I don't know what to do. I don't know if I can ever forgive him. Update the next day. Thank you all so much for the overwhelming love and support on my last post. After pouring my heart out and crying myself to sleep, I woke up feeling a little clearer. With trembling hands, I decided to call Andrew, my ex-boyfriend now. After I made that call to Andrew, I felt an odd sense of calm, as if I had finally taken control of a situation that had spiraled out of my grasp. I told him, with as much composure as I could muster, that it was over. 5 years was a long time, but the reality hit me that if he wasn't ready for marriage after all this time, and worse, if he thought it was something to joke about, then maybe he wasn't the one for me. As I spoke, I could hear the change in his voice. He started crying, his sadness palpable through the phone. But then, just as quickly, his sorrow turned to anger. He demanded that I stay, throwing accusations at me, claiming I was being unreasonable and selfish for leaving him after everything he had done for me. His words turned sharp and bitter, laced with insults, and though I tried to listen, I found myself zoning out, the sting of his betrayal dulling into a heavy, numbing ache. By the end of our conversation, we managed to reach a practical agreement. He would sleep in the guest room, and we would start the process of selling the house. But it wasn't a resolution. It was just a temporary truce in a battle that had only begun. That day, I spent hours scrolling through apartment listings, looking for a place to start over. Each click felt like a step closer to freedom, but Andrew wasn't ready to let go. He kept trying, sending messages all day long, pleading with me to reconsider, to forgive him for what he insisted was just a small mistake. The final straw came, accused me of being petty, telling me to drop it because, in his words, "You know we're happy together and you know you still want." I snapped. I couldn't believe the audacity of his words. Anger, hot and fierce, rose within me, and I let it all out. I called him every name I could think of, my voice shaking with rage, and then I slammed the door to my room, cutting off the conversation and shutting out the pain, at least for a moment. But it didn't end there. Later that day, I received a call from his mother. Her voice was harsh and judgmental as she berated me, calling me selfish and accusing me of overreacting to what she saw as just a harmless joke. The call ended with her calling me names and hanging up on me, leaving me stunned and hurt. As if that wasn't enough, messages started flooding in from his family, his siblings, his father, even an aunt. They all had something to say, and none of it was kind. I tried to block them, one after another, but the messages kept coming, like a never-ending barrage of cruelty. I felt trapped, desperate to escape this toxic situation. I started sorting through my belongings, deciding what I could sell, what I could leave behind, and what I would take with me to my new life. All I wanted was to get out as quickly as possible, to leave this painful chapter behind. Update. 10 days later. The days following that initial confrontation were a blur of arguments, tears, and emotional exhaustion. Every evening, it seemed, Andrew and I would fall into yet another fight, rehashing the same painful points over and over. Each argument left me feeling more drained and more certain that I had made the right decision. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. I reached out to my closest friend, and she graciously offered me a place to stay until I could find somewhere else to live. I packed up what I needed and left the house that had once been filled with so much love and hope. I'm still not sure what will happen with the house. Lawyers are involved now, and it seems like it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. But the biggest shock came a few days ago when I ran into Andrew's mother at the mall. I was just minding my own business, trying to enjoy a rare moment of peace, when she saw me. She stormed up to me, her face twisted with anger, and before I knew it, she was screaming at me in the middle of the mall. Her words were venomous, filled with accusations that cut deep. "How could you do this to my son?" she yelled. "You're a terrible human being." People around us stopped and stared, and I felt the humiliation burn on my cheeks. I didn't know what to say, so I just walked away, but the shame lingered long after. Since I moved out, the messages have only gotten worse. Andrew, his friends, and his family have bombarded me with hateful texts, calling me every name in the book. Some were so vile, so hurtful, that they made me break down in tears. They told me that no one would care if I died, that I was a waste of space, that I was selfish for leaving my boyfriend over what they insisted was a small joke. It was unbearable, and I began to see the truth in the situation. I had lost more than just a relationship. I had lost friends who turned their backs on me when I needed them the most. This whole experience still feels surreal, like a nightmare I can't wake up from. It's going to take a long time for me to process everything that has happened, to heal from the wounds that Andrew and his family have inflicted. But I'm trying to stay strong. I'm trying to move forward, even though the road ahead looks long and uncertain. If anything else happens, I'll keep you all updated. But for now, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for the support, for the kind words, and for helping me feel less alone in all of this. It means more than you know.